There are worlds where the air tastes like ash, where the sky is a bruise of industrial fumes and saint smoke, and every street echoes with the low thunder of marching boots and distant bombardment. But on holy Terra, cradle of mankind, the air is choked with something heavier than industry. It is thick with prayer, with fear, with the slow, unending rhythm of a dying god's breath. Deep beneath the imperial palace, beneath marble sanctums and gilded reliquaries and echoing cathedra of gold, lies the golden throne. And upon that awful device sits the master of mankind, the Emperor Eternal, locked in a state between life and death, so profound that language falters before it. The Astronomicon, the psychic beacon that guides every starship, burns only because the Emperor burns. And to keep that light alive across 1,000 worlds, every single day without pause, human souls are fed to him. Not as a metaphor, not as incense, but as sacrifice. 1,000 psychers a day consumed to stay a single heartbeat ahead of the dark. People speak of it softly, as if loud words alone might summon damnation. But if you step close to the heart of the Imperium, close enough to hear the machines that house the God Corps, you do not feel glory. You feel hunger. There is no silence on Terra. Even in the deepest hours of the night when the sun has rolled beneath the horizon, and the colossal towers cast their shadows across oceans of metal and stone, the city world murmurs and groans like a living thing. The air is thick with incense and the faint sting of ozone from overworked power relays. Vox speakers chant litanies without end, a constant susurration that settles into the blood and bone of every soul born beneath the Emperor's sky. The faithful claim that the prayers are for him, and perhaps they are, but there is another truth beneath the chanting. Terra prays because it is afraid. The ground is layered with centuries of construction, each generation building atop the bones of the last, until the surface itself has become a labyrinth of infrastructure, basilicas, hab blocks, manufactorum stacks, and the winding processional roads of pilgrims who never stop arriving. Even the oceans are not oceans anymore, but industrial reservoirs reflecting cathedral spires like broken mirrors. A person can live an entire lifetime on Terra without once seeing the horizon, only the walls of devotion pressing in on every side like a monumental cage built from piety. For those who dream of Terra from afar, it is a world of light, a world of banners and saints and the eternal presence of the Emperor's radiance. But those dreams belong to people who have never stood on the procession bridges during high observance, shoulder to shoulder with millions, all pressed together so tightly that breathing feels like an act of rebellion. They have not felt the overwhelming heat of the pilgrim fires, or the sharp sting of sanctified ash drifting down from the crematoria that burn day and night in the ecclesiarchy's shadow. On Terra, faith is not gentle. It is absolute, and it is enforced by the very weight of the world. There are streets where no sunlight reaches, where the only illumination comes from flickering devotional candles and the haunting glow of stained glass windows that tower hundreds of meters overhead. In these vaults, people whisper their prayers quickly, almost fearfully, as if the stone itself is listening. And perhaps it is, for the walls are thick with the memory of every voice that has ever spoken the Emperor's name. Pilgrims press their foreheads to the floor until their skin brews blue, seeking absolution simply for the act of breathing in his presence. Above them, in the higher tiers of the Imperial Palace's outer districts, the air grows thinner but no less heavy. Administratum scribes work in endless halls of parchment dust, copying records that no one will ever read but which must exist, because order itself is a form of worship. They sleep at their desks, their dreams filled with the scratching of quills, and wake only when a servitor taps their shoulder with cold metal precision, reminding them to continue. No one questions this. to question would require breath no one can spare. And then there are those who come from elsewhere. The Astra Militarum veterans brought home to be honored and forgotten. The nobles of distant planetary houses who arrive in silks and leave in sackcloth. The pilgrims who have crossed half the galaxy simply to stand one moment closer to the Emperor's resting place. They speak of Terra as something holy, but when they arrive, they learn a harsher truth. Holiness is not peaceful, it is crushing. The closer one comes to the Golden Throne, the more every sin, every doubt, every failing feels as though it is carved into the heart for all to see. Yet beneath all of this, beneath the incense and prayer and stone, there is something deeper still. A presence that does not speak but is always felt. It ripples through the warp, a beacon of impossible brightness, a flame that never extinguishes though the fuel it consumes is appalling to even contemplate. No one sees the source, not truly. The throne is hidden behind vaults, sanctums, and sanctified barriers of adamantium and forbidden technologies. But the world knows. Terra knows. Children grow up hearing tales of the Emperor as a god, radiant and eternal, his gaze spanning stars. But they also hear the whispers, the ones that slip through when candles burn low, and the chanting quiets for a heartbeat. Whispers of the psychers who are brought here. Whispers of what happens beneath the palace. Whispers of sacrifice. No one says the word directly. Not in the open, not where the air can carry it to the wrong ears. They call it service. They call it ascension. They call it necessary. The truth is softer, like something spoken in a dream you are terrified to remember. The Emperor is dying, or he is living in a way that no mortal could comprehend. Or he is both at once, trapped at the edge of godhood, sustained only by the endless offering of souls. There is no consensus, no doctrine that satisfies every mind. The ecclesiarchy has decrees, the mechanicus has schematics, the Adeptus custodes have silence, and the common people have fear. But fear on Terra is a form of faith. The world keeps praying. The world keeps burning. And every day the line of pilgrims grows longer. The pilgrims who come to Terra often believe there will be a moment, a singular instant of revelation, when they will feel the Emperor's presence as a warmth, a voice, a certainty. They imagine they will stand before the gates of the Imperial Palace, look upon the gilded buttresses and towering guardians, and understand. But the gates are never seen, not by them. The palace is not a single structure. It is an entire landscape of fortifications, walls that stretch beyond the curvature of the world, guarded by men who do not breathe in the same cadence as ordinary humanity. The custodian guard stands watch at the innermost sanctums, golden giants whose armor gleams not with vanity, but with a stillness that suggests they have already judged the worth of every soul in sight. No pilgrim approaches them. The distance to such beings could not be crossed even if the road lay open. Instead, the pilgrims gather in plazas and prayer concourses, where statues of saints tower high enough to pierce the smog haze. Here, the faithful kneel until their knees crack, chanting words they often do not understand, repeating them until meaning dissolves and only rhythm remains. Vendors walk the crowds offering simple food, tokens, ribbons, minor relics sealed in ceramite cases so small and worn that even the sellers do not know what fragment of bone lies within. There are hymns for every hour, and if one cannot remember the words, one simply moves their lips in time. On Terra, there is no shame in ignorance so long as devotion does not waver. Sometimes someone breaks. A pilgrim who has crossed 1,000 worlds realizes in sudden horror that the Emperor's gaze will never fall on them, that they will never ascend to clarity or peace, that the God they have chased across the stars is locked away in agony deeper than any mortal can imagine. They scream, they claw at their own face, they shout heresies they do not understand, and the crowd does not turn to them in pity. The crowd shifts back slightly to allow the silent, gray-robed confessors to move forward. A needle touches the pilgrim's throat. The screaming stops. The prayers continue. There are no crises of faith on Terra, only corrections. Not far from these open squares, deeper within the hive-dense districts of the capital, the air grows stale with the smell of bodies pressed together. Millions live in hab blocks that rise like cliffs, their windows sealed, their corridors narrow, their stairwells echoing with muffled arguments and rapid, exhausted breathing. Generations are born, live, and die in these stacked towers without ever seeing the sky. Their lives are recorded in administratum ledgers, assigned production quotas or labor duties that pass from parent to child in an unbroken chain. They do not question, not because they have accepted this existence, but because they cannot imagine alternatives. Freedom is not a word that survives long in such places, and yet, even here, prayer is constant. Vox grills mounted to every corridor and dormitory murmur canticles. Each hab has at least one shrine built from scavenged fragments of metal and stone. Even a broken cogpiece or a scrap of sculpted aquila wing can become a devotional artifact if placed in the right light. A candle burns at every hour. Always. If the flame dies, the block gathers to reignite it. The candle is not merely wax and wick. It is the idea that the Emperor still sees them. But whether he sees anything is a question no one will ask aloud. The closer one travels toward the heart of Terra, the more the world begins to feel like a single organism, inhaling and exhaling in rhythm with the throne itself. The chanting deepens. The architecture grows impossibly vast, as though the masons carved space itself into obedience. It is said that some halls inside the palace are so large that sound never reaches the far wall, that voices are swallowed into silence, that footsteps echo back minutes after they are made. It is said, too, that there are corridors where one may walk for days without passing another living being, where time seems uncertain, where the air feels charged with something that is not merely reverence. These are only stories, of course. No common citizen will ever see such things, but stories have weight on Terra, and they move like currents through the crowds. And there is another story, whispered only in the darkest corners where the incense smoke fades and the candles burn low. The story that beneath the palace, beneath sanctums and reliquary vaults, and layers of forbidden machinery, there is a chamber in which psychers are brought by the thousands. That there are vault doors that open only when sealed by a custodian's gene print. That the air there does not smell of incense at all. That it smells of something burned. The pilgrims pretend not to hear these whispers. The administratum clerks pretend not to know. Even the ecclesiarchy, in their embroidered vestments and soaring hymns, speak around the subject as if language itself recoils from it. But the truth has a way of lingering behind the eyes. Every person on Terra knows, in some buried place within themselves, that faith here is built on sacrifice. That devotion requires cost, and that cost is measured in human souls. The prayers continue, the smoke rises, and somewhere, far below, something hungry stirs. On the upper terraces of the sigillite causeways, where the wind is thin and sharp and carries the faint metallic taste of countless chimneys below, the pilgrims often try to look toward the heart of the palace. They squint through the haze, past banners the height of cathedral walls and monolithic statues whose faces are eroded by centuries of ashfall, trying to glimpse even the suggestion of the golden throne. But the palace is not a structure designed to be seen. It is designed to be felt. The walls are too thick, the courtyards too vast, the patrol routes of the custodian guard too precise to allow chance. Even the light behaves differently there. Sunbeams fall at unnatural angles, as if bent by the gravity of reverence, or the pull of something deeper, something that watches. The pilgrims speak in hushed tones about how the Emperor once walked among men. They describe him as radiant, serene, incomprehensibly wise. They tell each other of ancient conquests, of the Great Crusade, of the unity he forged from a fractured humanity tearing itself apart. Yet, even in these retellings, there is a sense of distance. The Emperor they describe is not the one who sits upon the throne now. That figure, if it can be called a figure, is not a presence that walks or speaks or moves. It is a burden, a weight that presses down upon the world like the shadow of a collapsing star. And still, they call him Father. There are processions that wind through Terra's great arterial pathways, where thousands march behind relic palanquins carried by servo drones and chanting clergy. The faithful push forward to touch the ceramite housings of sacred icons, believing that a single brush of fingertips may grant them visions or blessings or absolution. But the relics are never explained. A fragment of broken plating, a withered piece of fabric sealed behind diamond glass, a shard of bone said to have belonged to a saint who died before the Imperium was even formed. Faith does not require context. To ask where these relics come from is to imply they could have come from anywhere else. Not all on Terra are pilgrims. Some are born here. Some are raised to believe this density of devotion is ordinary. For them, the world has always thrummed with an undercurrent of psychic tension, a subtle pulse that feels like a heartbeat echoing through the stone. They do not realize the rest of humanity does not feel this. They do not know that other worlds have skies clean enough to show stars, air gentle enough to breathe without tasting iron. Their lungs were shaped for incense, their eyes for candlelight, their sleep for whispered hymns. Even the children play at worship. They fashion mock golden helms from scrap metal and pretend to guard the last light of mankind. They carve crude aquilas into plaster and recite litanies in voices not yet broken. And in their games, someone always plays the psyker. Someone always kneels. Someone always gives themselves up. The children do not understand the meaning of the role. But roles have power, even when spoken without comprehension. Especially then. The whispers grow louder the closer one draws toward the inner sanctums of the palace. The pilgrims speak of the chosen, those selected from across the galaxy, brought aboard the black ships, destined to serve a purpose no one dares describe plainly. In the plazas, their existence is spoken of with reverence. In the alleyways between towering hab blocks, their existence is spoken of with dread. Psykers are dangerous, unpredictable, barely controlled conduits of the warp. Their minds are open to terrors the rest of humanity was never meant to perceive. And yet, they are necessary. For without them, the light would fade. There is a moment, always, when a pilgrim finally realizes what that means. They may hear it by accident from a careless tongue. They may glimpse a line of robed figures escorted by silent custodians, their hands bound not with chains, but with psionic dampeners. They may see the exhaustion etched into the faces of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica acolytes returning from the inner causeways. Their steps slow, as though their souls themselves are heavier than their bodies can bear. The realization is rarely spoken aloud. It manifests instead as a subtle shift in posture, a lingering stillness, a breath held a moment too long, a prayer said with a tremor. Faith does not break in an instant. It stretches, strains, reconfigures itself into shapes that can survive the truth. For if the Emperor is sustained by sacrifice, then the Imperium is built upon the weight of those who are consumed. And if that sacrifice were ever to cease, even imagination refuses to complete the thought. The pilgrims do not leave Terra as they arrived. Some depart with eyes shining, convinced their devotion has been affirmed. Others leave hollowed, as though something inside them has been gently removed. Some do not leave at all. They vanish into the labyrinth of the palace's lower approachways, guided by robed attendants with expressions of calm inevitability. They are not spoken of afterward, but every day the plaza fires burn. Every day the prayers resound. Every day the scent of incense mingles with something faintly metallic drifting on the wind. And the line continues forward. There are places on Terra where the ground itself is warm. Not from the sun, for sunlight rarely reaches the lower levels, but from the constant labor of machines buried under centuries of stone and devotion. Entire districts tremble with the low thunder of reactors and cathedral-sized coolant engines, mechanisms older than living memory, older even than the stories told of the Emperor's walking days. The citizens who live above these rumbling depths learn to sleep through the vibration, their dreams sinking to the slow pulse of the world core. To them, the trembling earth is simply another prayer. In the shadow of the palace walls, at the edge of the petitionary gates where no petitioners ever truly meant to pass, there are procession halls lined with statues of long-dead heroes. Their eyes stare forward with perfect calm, as though still gazing upon the Emperor's living form. Some statues are chipped. Others are worn to faceless smoothness by the brush of passing hands. The faithful touch them as they walk, leaving behind oils, tears, hopes, confessions. It is said the statues remember, not in a way that can be spoken of, but in the way stone retains the warmth of a hand long after the hand has gone. It is here, in this space where hope and dread mingle like incense smoke curling in heavy air, that the truth is most difficult to ignore. The petitioners stand in lines that stretch for kilometers. Some wait days, some weeks. Some die where they stand, their bodies carried away by silent Order Hospitaller attendants, replaced by others who step forward without comment. They have come to offer prayers, to give thanks, to seek forgiveness, or to simply be close to the presence that radiates from the throne. But every now and then, among these vast crowds, a different procession appears. Robed figures, heads shaved, eyes downcast. They are escorted by custodians or by psychona wardens in armor inscribed with wards of containment and purity. No one speaks to them. No one reaches out. The crowd parts in reverent silence, or something colder, something that trembles at the edges. These are not pilgrims. They are offerings. Some look resigned, some look hollow, some look terrified beyond words, their breath coming in shallow bursts as if each inhale is argued for. But all of them look forward. Not because they want to, because they must, the way a falling object must continue to fall. The crowd watches, the prayers do not stop, but the rhythm changes, the voices soften. A hush moves through the masses like a breeze through still fields. No one says the word sacrifice, not here, not in the open, but the knowledge hangs in the air like a scent. Those who have lived on Terra long enough have learned to keep their eyes lowered at such moments. Once the procession passes, the prayers resume in full force, louder than before, as though by filling the air with devotion the gathered masses may drown the shape of what they witnessed. 1,000 voices rise, then 10,000, then more. They pray until their throats ache, until thought dissolves and all that remains is sound. The Emperor hears us, they say. The Emperor must hear. And below it all, like a second heartbeat beating out of rhythm, lies another truth. The Emperor must be fed. Yet even with this knowledge, or perhaps because of it, Terra endures. Humanity endures. The galaxy continues to burn with wars and horrors and unending conflict, but the beacon of the Astronomicon still cuts through the warp like a divine blade, guiding ships, guiding legions, guiding entire worlds. And the people of Terra hold to that light with a devotion so absolute it has become indistinguishable from necessity. For without the Emperor, the Imperium would fall. The stars would become impossible distances. The warp would swallow the lost. The great worlds would starve and freeze and fracture. Billions would die screaming in the dark. And so, Terra accepts its purpose. The world bows, the world offers, the world continues. Faith here is not a choice. It is survival. As the day cycles turn and the night bells toll, and another tide of pilgrims arrives to replace the ones who have collapsed in prayer, the city world does not rest. The incense smoke rises. The fog of devotion thickens. The palace walls glow faintly in the distant haze, like an ember sheltered inside a colossal hearth. And somewhere deep beneath that ember, beneath vaults and sanctums and machinery no mortal tongue has words to describe, a throne of gold hums with a hunger older than memory. The world prays. The world trembles. The world waits. And the line of offerings grows longer. Chapter 1 ends here, with Terra breathing as a world of endless prayer and endless cost. When we continue, we will follow those whose fate is sealed long before they ever set foot on this world. We will follow the Psychers. We will board the black ships. We will walk the path that leads to the throne. If you can hear my voice in this place, if you walk these labyrinthine corridors of memory with me, then linger. Watch. Bear witness. And if the telling carves something into you, if the truth of this sacrifice settles like dust on your hands, remember to share this story, to let it circulate, to let others feel what you now feel. If you remain with me, subscribe to this journey, so the signal does not falter. The Astronomicon must not go dark. Across the Imperium, the moment of discovery rarely comes gently. It can begin as a whisper, a flicker at the edge of hearing, a sudden sense that someone else's thoughts are not entirely their own. Or it can erupt violently, a surge of power that shatters glass and sanity alike. On Hive worlds, where billions toil beneath ash-choked skies, it often starts small. A child hears voices no one else can. A laborer dreams of places they have never seen. A mother's grief triggers a tremor that shakes the Hab block to its foundations. The Imperium has many words for Psychers: sanctionite, witch, asset, threat. But none of those words matter at the beginning. At the beginning, there is only fear. When the black ship arrives, it does not descend like a hero's vessel. It does not gleam or herald. It simply appears, a vast and silent shadow in the upper atmosphere, a presence that swallows all joy and all warmth from the sky. Its hull is blackened ceramite, adorned with runes of warding and sigils of containment, built to withstand things mortal hands cannot describe. The people of a world feel its arrival long before they see it. Animals panic. Vox networks distort. Even those without psychic sensitivity feel a pressure behind the eyes, like a hand pressing down on the soul. The Astra Telepathica and the Inquisition descend with cold efficiency. They do not need to explain themselves. They carry lawful authority not from any mortal ruler, but from the throne itself. Their presence is not a negotiation. It is a declaration. The Psychers of this world will be found. They will be taken, and no one will interfere. Some come quietly. A young boy who has spent years trying to silence the whispers in his mind, exhausted beyond tears. A woman whose dreams bleed into waking life until she no longer knows which world is real. They step forward because they cannot bear to remain. Because they hope the Imperium will show them mercy, guidance, purpose. Others fight, they claw, scream, and plead. Families attempt to hide their own, sealing them behind false walls or bribing local authorities. But the black ships are not deceived. Their acolytes carry devices that can sense psychic resonance as surely as a nose can scent smoke. The walls are opened, the hidden are uncovered, and the begging begins. The inquisitorial agents do not shout, they do not need to. They explain, in tones so controlled they might as well be reciting scripture, that resistance is a crime against the Emperor. That psychers, uncontrolled, can invite demonic incursions, warp breaches, planetary ruin. And these words are true. The warp does not forgive ignorance. A single untrained mind can become a door through which nightmares enter the world. Everyone knows this. They have heard the stories, whispered in dim corridors, of worlds torn open because a child screamed in the wrong way. So the psychers are gathered, they are bound, not with chains but with psi-dampening collars, devices that numb the mind and dull the senses. A mercy, the acolytes say. The psycher does not feel like it is mercy. The world becomes muffled. Thought becomes heavy. Dreams flatten into gray. Those who attempt escape meet the Adeptus Arbites. Their law is final. Their batons and bolt pistols enforce not justice, but survival. And through it all, the crowds watch. There is always a crowd. Dozens, hundreds, thousands. Families gripping each other's arms tightly, grateful it is not them this time. Old men whispering litanies of protection under their breath. Children staring wide-eyed, not understanding the scene but understanding the fear. Sometimes someone spits at the psychers, calls them cursed, calls them tainted, blames them for the world's misfortunes. But sometimes someone reaches out a hand, a mother, a sibling, a friend. Their touch lingers for a heartbeat before a warden pulls them apart. The psychers are led up the ramps into the belly of the black ship. From the outside, the ship is silent. From the inside, it is not. Within those walls, the air vibrates with something like a distant scream, not sound, but pressure. The corridors are narrow, the lights dimmed to prevent overstimulation of fragile minds. Wardens walk in silent, perfect formation, their visors reflecting nothing. There are no windows. There are no views of the stars. The psychers are meant to look inward now. Those who have traveled aboard these ships say time behaves strangely. Days stretch, nights fade. The warp brushes against the hull in whispers and promises. Some psychers cry. Some sit motionless for days. Some pray with desperate fervor, crying out to the Emperor for protection. They do not know the Emperor will never answer. Not directly, not here, but they will serve him. In the end, all of them will serve. Inside the black ship, the air never truly settles. It feels as though the atmosphere is being pulled in many directions at once, as if unseen tides are moving through the vessel. The psychers sense this before they understand it. Some sit curled against the walls of their cells, their breaths shallow and rapid, trying to make themselves small enough to escape the attention of whatever watches from beyond. Others pace in slow, repetitive circles, their muscles twitching with restrained agitation, like animals who know a predator is near but cannot see it. There is no unity among them. Each is isolated even when surrounded. Some were taken from quiet agri worlds, where the whisper of wind across fields was the loudest sound they knew. Others were dragged from hive slums where life was already a fight for breath. Some were educated, some could not speak a common tongue. But here, all differences become meaningless. In the black ship, identity dissolves into a single truth. Every person aboard is both necessary and expendable. The wardens move with a stillness that feels unnatural. Their armor is marked with sigils of binding and protection, their weapons precise, calibrated for psychic suppression rather than battlefield spectacle. They do not speak unless required. When they do, their voices are filtered through vox grills that flatten tone until even mercy sounds like decree. They are not cruel. Cruelty requires investment. These wardens simply fulfill function. They are as much a part of the ship as the bulkheads and relays. Meals arrive through automated ports, nutrient slurry designed to dull hunger rather than satisfy. Water tastes faintly metallic, recycled countless times over. Sleep comes in fragments. The lighting never fully dims but instead shifts to an amber haze during rest cycles, as though mimicking a sunset no one aboard will ever see again. Dreams are fractured. Some psychers jerk awake gasping, certain they felt something brushing the inside of their skull. Some awaken sobbing without memory of why. Some wake laughing, which is always worse. There are moments of instruction. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica sends lecturers, robed figures whose faces are hidden by hoods embroidered with runes of warding. They speak of purpose, of duty, of the Emperor's guiding light. They explain, with careful and measured clarity, that psychers are not cursed, but chosen, that their suffering is meaningful, that the greatest among them will serve the master of mankind directly. The lecturers always use the word serve, never the word die. The psychers listen. Some cling to these words like lifelines, desperate to believe that their pain forms part of a larger sacred tapestry. Others hear only the spaces between the sentences, the things that are not said. They notice the way the lecturer's eyes never meet theirs. They notice the way the wardens stand just a little closer during these talks. They notice that hope, here, feels like an instrument rather than a gift. As the journey continues, some psychers begin to manifest more strongly. A girl who once only heard faint whispers now screams as visions tear through her mind, her voice echoing through the metal corridors until a suppression collar raises its power and she collapses. A man who once dreamed of distant worlds now lashes out in sudden terror, flinging a warden across the chamber with invisible force before a side damper sears his thoughts into silence. The ship does not slow. The ship does not bend. The ship accepts and contains. On rare occasions, a psycher simply stops moving. They sit with their backs straight, their eyes unfocused, hands folded gently in their lap. They do not eat, they do not blink, they do not respond. Some say they have seen something in the warp that their minds could not hold. Others say this is acceptance. The wardens remove them quietly. No one learns where they go. The warp presses closer now. The ship has touched its currents. Some psychers feel it as color behind their eyelids. Some feel it as music. Some feel it as hunger. No one speaks of these sensations to others. They understand instinctively that to share the feeling is to give it strength. And yet, the warp does not require invitation. It waits. The black ship travels toward Terra with unwavering purpose. The psychers aboard do not measure time in days or weeks. They measure it in the number of times their thoughts remain their own. The number of times their dreams do not bleed into waking. The number of times they remember who they were before. Some keep count, some stop. Some forget there was anything to forget. Eventually, the ship begins to descend. The gravity shifts. The air grows heavier. The murmuring in the warp recedes, drowned beneath something far greater. A presence so vast, so overwhelming, that the psychers feel it like a sun pressed against the mind. Some fall to their knees and weep. Some clutch their heads in agony. Some smile, as though this pressure is the first warmth they have known. The Emperor does not speak, but his silence fills everything. The black ship has reached Terra. When the black ship reaches Terra's atmosphere, it does so without spectacle. There are no triumphant banners, no horns, no proclamations. The ship descends like a shadow returning to its source. The Psychers feel the shift before they see anything, a pressure in the lungs, a tightening beneath the ribs, an awareness that the air itself carries intent. Terra is not just a world, it is a presence, a weight, a vast, suffocating gravity of history, sorrow, and worship. The docking bays are quiet. Silent servitors glide forward on tracked limbs to secure clamps and lock conduits into place. Hooded attendants stand in rows, hands folded within their sleeves, their expressions unreadable. The wardens begin the disembarkation without pause. There are no speeches, no reassurances. The Psychers are led from the vessel in a slow, ordered line, each step echoing across metal platforms that stretch into cavernous halls of stone and gold. For many, this is their first time seeing the architecture of Terra. They lift their eyes to vaults so immense they cannot conceive how such structures were built by human hands. Gilded pillars rise like the trunks of impossible trees. Vast murals painted in pigments of crushed gems depict the emperor triumphant in ages, now nothing but fractured legend. Every surface, every tile, every inch of relief work is a testament to a glory that once walked but no longer moves. And yet, none of it comforts. Beauty and terror exist here as equals. The Psychers are herded across bridges lined with statues of custodians. Not real custodians, statues carved from auric alloys, yet lifelike enough that the Psychers feel watched. The custodian guard themselves appear only intermittently. But when they do, the air changes. Conversation falters. Minds flatten. A custodian in full armor radiates a presence like a pillar of inevitability, as though they stand not in the world but above it. They do not need to speak. Their gazes alone carry the weight of unbroken service older than empires. The Psychers are not addressed. Their names are not called. They are numbers now, entries in ledgers carried by administratum adepts whose faces are pale from decades of indoor parchment dust and candlelight. These clerks move with urgency but without emotion, recording details with quills that scratch like insect legs against parchment. They do not look at the Psychers. They look through them, as one might regard cargo that must be inventoried before it can be processed. Processing does not mean release, it means direction. Corridors narrow, light dims, the murals shift from scenes of triumph to scenes of sacrifice. Angels with hollow eyes carry flames. Warriors kneel with faces bowed, their identities erased by ritual. The Psychers walk through a history painted to remind them of their place in the Imperium's order, necessary, but never cherished. Some break here. A young man collapses, his knees hitting stone with a crack. His breath comes in ragged gasps as he clutches his head, murmuring apologies to no one and everyone. "I didn't choose this," he whispers. "I didn't ask." His voice is small. The wardens lift him with efficiency and no malice. Sedatives calm him. The line continues. Others move with a distant calm. A woman from a shrine world keeps her eyes forward, her lips forming silent prayer. She believes, truly believes, that she has been chosen to serve some divine plan. Her faith is not a shield, it is a map. And yet even she flinches when the chanting begins. It begins as a hum, a low, monotonous drone that reverberates through the stone. It grows in tone, building layer upon layer until it becomes a chorus without words. The Psychers feel it rather than hear it. The sound vibrates inside their bones, their skulls, their teeth. This is not music, it is alignment, it is preparation. The procession reaches the Hall of Thousand Voices. This hall is vast, lit by braziers that burn with white flame. The air smells of sanctified oils and scorched copper. Rows of robed figures stand here, each with their face hidden beneath deep cowl hoods. These are the choir masters. Their voices sustain the Astronomicon. Their minds touch the Emperor's will. They are not entirely human anymore. They have given too much. When they turn their heads toward the Psykers, the sensation is not visual. It is psychic pressure, soft, inexorable, absolute. The Psykers are seen, not with eyes, with judgment. Some Psykers cry, some go still, some begin to tremble in slow, rhythmic pulses, as though controlled by strings only they can feel. A choir master raises a hand. The chanting stops. The silence that follows is heavier than sound. A warden speaks not to comfort, but to declare, "You have been brought here for purpose. You will serve the Emperor. You will sustain his light. You will uphold humanity. This is not punishment. This is not reward. This is necessity." No one replies, not because they are obedient, but because the truth leaves no room for words. The line moves forward again. One step closer to the throne. One step closer to the hunger at its heart. Deep within the palace, the air grows warmer, thick with the scent of incense and coolant, of polished gold and an undercurrent of something that no mortal tongue can quite name. The corridors are narrower here, not because the architecture has become cramped, but because the space is intentional, controlled, measured. The Psykers walk single file. Their footsteps are nearly silent. The wardens do not allow hesitation. Every moment is choreographed, as if generations of procedure have been refined into something approaching ritual. They pass through a series of checkpoints, each more sacred than the last. At one, attendants test their psychic resonance with crystal rods inscribed in High Gothic runes. At another, pale-robed adepts scan them with auspex arrays designed to detect warp corruption or instability. Those who fail are removed, quietly, swiftly, without ceremony. There is no sound to mark their absence, but the shifting of the line as it closes around the space where they once stood. The Psykers learn not to look. When the hall opens again, it reveals a chamber filled with sound. Not chanting this time, but a single note held indefinitely, resonating from unseen throats. The sound is pure, unwavering, the auditory equivalent of a straight, unbroken line. The Psykers feel it vibrate through their sternums, through their teeth, through the marrow inside their bones. It is not painful, it is absolute. A psychic tuning fork aligning their minds with something greater, sharpening them into instruments. The chamber is ringed by towering mechanical conduits, vast tubes of braided silver and adamantium that pulse with faint blue light. The Psykers do not know what these machines are. They do not need to. They exist for a single purpose: to contain, channel, and focus the power of human souls. The wardens do not speak. The choir masters do not speak. Still, the message is clear. Further hesitation is no longer possible. A pair of custodians stands at the far end of the chamber, silent as statues but impossibly present. Their armor catches the torchlight, not in glitter but in gravity. They are immovable, eternal. They do not judge, they observe. And in their presence, the Psykers understand something on a level deeper than conscious thought. The custodians do not wonder whether this sacrifice is right. They do not question. If this were not necessary, if this did not serve the Emperor, these golden warriors would not allow it. That is the truth that crushes all others. The line continues. Some Psykers begin to pray aloud now, not in coordinated recitation but in broken whispers, apologies, pleas, thank yous, bargains. Some call for the Emperor, some for loved ones long gone, some for a mother's hand they can no longer picture clearly. But the prayer that rises above the others is the simplest, oldest one humanity has ever spoken. Please, let me live. No voice answers. The hall beyond is narrower still. Here, attendants place their hands on each Psyker's shoulders, guiding them forward with gentleness that feels cruel, Collars are loosened, restraints adjusted. Their minds expand just slightly, just enough to feel the raw pulse of the warp pressing against the veil of reality like a tide. A few gasp, a few collapse. One vomits and is dragged away before they can choke. Another laughs hysterically until sedation stills their thoughts. The line moves regardless. At the final threshold, the air changes again. It grows cold, the light grows dim. The footsteps of the custodians no longer echo, and the psychers understand, not through instruction, but through instinct, that they have crossed into the first true boundary of the throne's domain. They do not see the golden throne. Not yet. That sight is reserved for the final step, and the final step is never walked by the living mind intact. Instead, they sense it, a presence that is both infinite and confined, radiant and ruined, glorious and suffering. It is the paradox that sustains humanity and the wound that never closes. Something vast turns its attention toward them, not individually. As one, the psychers tremble, some weep. One whispers so quietly that only those nearest can hear. He is still fighting. No one knows if it is faith or madness. No one asks, because in this place, faith and madness are the same. The Emperor endures, and so must they. The chamber doors seal behind them with a sound like the closing of history. The sacrifice is ready, the hunger waits. Chapter 2 ends here, at the threshold. From here, there is only descent. There are corridors beneath the Imperial Palace that no map records, no chronicler describes, no priest dares to name. They wind downward like arteries, leading not toward a heart that beats, but toward a presence that endures through sheer will. The light in these corridors is dim and steady, without flicker or warmth. It comes from sources not wholly electrical nor wholly arcane, a pale radiance that does not cast shadows but simply exists. Sound is swallowed here. Footsteps fall softly. Breath seems thinner. Even thought feels monitored. The psychers are led by attendants of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, men and women whose eyes are ringed with permanent exhaustion, and whose expressions have been erased by routine. They do not speak except to issue single-word instructions. Forward, kneel, rise, wait. Their tone is hollow, as though whatever humanity once lived behind their voices has long since been consumed by the work of tending to this place. They are not cruel, they are empty. The air becomes colder the deeper they descend. Not the cold of winter or steel, but a cold that feels as though it comes from within the bones themselves, as if something is drawing heat out of them, as if the body must sacrifice warmth to approach the throne. The psychers shiver, though none dare complain. Their collars hum faintly, suppressing the swell of psychic instincts that rise in response to the pressure of the warp so close. Somewhere, far above, Terra continues its endless chorus of prayer. But here, in these buried sanctums, prayer becomes something quieter, something internal. Every breath is a plea. Every heartbeat is an offering. The first chamber they enter is vast. Its ceiling disappears into darkness, supported by colossal pillars carved with runes older than the Imperium, older perhaps than language itself. The walls are lined with reliquaries containing objects so ancient their origin is no longer remembered. Twisted blades of dull metal, fragments of banners, shards of armor from wars long forgotten. None of these relics are labeled. None are displayed with reverence. They simply exist, like memories that cannot be discarded even when their meaning has faded. At the far end of the chamber looms a gate. Not a door, not merely a barrier. A gate made of interlocking plates of adamantium and gold, each the size of a building wall, etched with symbols that pulse faintly when looked at directly. The gate is closed, but the psychers feel what lies beyond it. not through sight or sound, but through pressure, as though the air right in front of the gate is heavier, denser, saturated with something immense. Their knees weaken without command. The attendants stop the procession. They do not turn to face the psychers. Instead, they bow their heads. Their silence is not reverence but exhaustion, as if they have bowed like this every day for longer than they can remember. Then the custodians arrive. Not in parade, not in formation. They simply are suddenly present, towering figures clad in auric armor that glows faintly in the cold light. The air shifts when they enter. Even the warp seems to still, as though unwilling to disturb their focus. Their visors conceal their expressions, but there is no need to see their eyes to understand. The custodian guard does not mourn, does not question, does not doubt. One of them speaks, and his voice is like a temple bell struck underwater, deep and resonant. You will be taken before the throne. You will serve the master of mankind. Your lives will uphold the light that guides humanity. There is no greater honor. The words are not meant to comfort. They simply are. The psychers do not respond. Some lower their heads. Some stare forward as though their eyes have turned to glass. One begins to shake, not with fear, but with a strange, rising calm, as if surrender has settled upon her shoulders like a cloak. Her breathing slows. Her eyes close. She is already gone in a way that cannot be seen. The custodian turns and the attendants move. The procession approaches the gate. There is no key, no lock, no mechanism of mortal design. The gate opens because it is time. The plates shift with soundless motion, revealing a corridor beyond that glows with pale, golden light. The air smells different here. Not incense, not oil, but something faintly metallic and sweet, like the breath of a dying star. The psychers step forward. No one looks back. Beyond this threshold, everything changes. The throne is near, close enough to touch, close enough to consume. The corridor that follows is narrower than any the psychers have walked before, but the narrowing does not feel physical. It feels intentional. The air thickens. The walls seem to press in, not with force, but with awareness. Every breath taken here feels as though it is borrowed. The psychers walk in silence. Even those who sobbed moments ago now hold their breath, as if the simple act of exhaling might draw unwanted attention. At the far end of the corridor, the light blooms. Not bright, not radiant, but pervasive. A slow, pulsing glow that seems to rise from the very floor. It is warm and cold at once, a paradox of sensation that makes the skin prickle. The psychers step into a chamber that stretches beyond the limits of sight. Pillars rise into a golden haze overhead, disappearing into vaulted darkness. The floor is made of stone, polished to mirror smooth reflection, yet no reflection appears. The psychers' feet touch nothing, or rather, they touch something that does not remember what it means to be ground. This is the first true antechamber of the Golden Throne. At the center of the chamber stands a dais of obsidian and gold. Upon it kneel a group of psychers, perhaps 20, perhaps 30, locked in formation. Their bodies are frail, their skin is pale, their eyes are blank, staring towards something the new arrivals cannot see. They do not move, they do not breathe, and yet they are alive. Or at least, something in them still clings to existence. They are the choir. The psychers feel it before they understand it. These kneeling figures are still thinking, still feeling, still screaming, but only in the space behind their eyes, where no voice can reach. Attendants move among them, adjusting collars, checking pulse fields, whispering litanies of stabilization under their breath. Their hands shake just slightly. not with fear, but with the exhaustion of endless repetition. They have done this work so long that their bones remember motions, their minds no longer notice. The newly arrived psychers are placed along the periphery of the chamber. They stand in a loose circle, each given a small amount of space, not out of respect, but necessity. Minds too close together here might bleed into one another. The warp may be distant outside these halls, but here, its reflection pools like water waiting to be disturbed. A choir master steps forward. His robes trail behind him like strips of shadow. His face is visible, but there is no expression in it. Only purpose carved so deep it has replaced identity. When he speaks, his voice is barely louder than a whisper, yet it fills the chamber as though carried by unseen choir. You will hold your thoughts. You will still your fears. You will not struggle. You will not cling. The throne does not abide resistance. His gaze sweeps the room, not judging, measuring. One of the psychers cannot bear it. A boy, no older than 17, breaks into a run. He does not scream, he does not plead, he simply runs, driven by something primal, something that has no words. He makes it 3 steps before a custodian's hand closes around his shoulder. No force is applied, no violence. The boy simply collapses, not dead, just emptied. His mind falls silent with the terrifying finality of a candle being pinched out. The attendants drag his limp body away with the same quiet efficiency with which everything occurs here. No one speaks of him again. The choir master raises his hand. The air shifts. It begins. A low vibration thrums beneath the floor. The psychers feel it in their teeth, in their spines, in the spaces behind their eyes. The collars around their necks loosen fractionally, allowing their abilities to breathe just enough to be guided. Their minds stretch reluctantly, painfully, like limbs forced to move after long disuse. Some gasp, some clench their fists. One begins to laugh, the sound brittle and thin, before the collar tightens and silences it. The choir rises as one, slowly, mechanically as though pulled by strings. Their mouths open, light pours out. Not physical light, but psychic radiance. A channel, a conduit. A beam that extends upward and outward, far beyond Terra, beyond the warp, beyond anything the mortal mind can conceptualize. The psychers feel themselves drawn toward it, pulled like dust into a storm, their thoughts fraying at the edges. They see stars, they see galaxies, they see shadows moving between them. They see a throne, not golden, but burning. And on that throne sits a figure that is not a man, not anymore, but a presence made of memory, pain, will, and something that once could have been love. The mind recoils, the heart trembles, the soul bends. They are being connected. This is not worship, this is consumption. And the Emperor does not speak words, he speaks hunger. The room darkens. One psyker screams, then another. Then the screaming stops, not because the pain ends, but because there is no breath left to scream with. The choir master lowers his hand. The throne has begun to feed. There are no flames, no razors, no executioners. The sacrifice of psychers is not violent in any way that the body understands. It is the mind that dies first, the self, the part that wakes each morning and remembers its own name. That is what the golden throne takes. The psychers feel themselves stretching, pulled like threads into a loom they cannot comprehend. It is not a gentle weaving. It is forceful, absolute, indifferent. The Emperor's presence presses into their consciousness with a gravity that cannot be resisted. It is not cruelty. Cruelty implies intention. This is simply need. One of the psychers, a woman with hair unbound and eyes still bright with belief, tries to speak. Her lips form silent words as if she is trying to pray, not for herself, but for him. Her expression is not fear, it is grief. grief for a god who does not have the strength to speak back. Her thoughts begin to fray. Her memories unspool. They unravel into strands of light drawn upward toward the beam that connects the choir to the throne. She sees her childhood. A quiet courtyard, her mother's hands, the shape of a window where sunlight fell through dust in perfect stillness once, long ago. She tries to hold the memory close, but it dissolves. The throne does not allow possessions of the self. Another psyker claws at his own face, not out of madness but in an instinctive attempt to keep hold of who he is. He digs his nails into his skin as if anchoring himself to the present moment could stop what is happening behind his thoughts. Blood streaks across his cheeks in thin, desperate lines. His mind is slipping through his fingers. He knows it. He fights. He fights with everything he has. And it does not matter. His memories tear loose, they rise into the current, then they are gone. The choir master stands with eyes half open, watching not with pity, not with pride, but with understanding. He has seen this 1,000 times, 10,000, a number beyond meaning. His own memories are faint echoes, preserved only because the throne has not yet taken them. Not yet, but he knows it will. Everyone who serves here knows the end that awaits them. In this place, death is not something that happens at the end of life. It happens one thought at a time. A custodian moves through the chamber with steps so quiet they seem to belong to a dream. He watches the psychers, not to comfort them, not to condemn them, but to ensure the procession continues unbroken. His duty is not to the living. His duty is to the Emperor, to the throne, to the light that keeps humanity from being swallowed whole by the warp. His presence carries a message no words are needed to express. There is no other way. A new psyker is brought forward, a girl, barely more than a child. Her legs shake, but she does not run. She watches the dying minds around her, and her face does not break. There is something still and hollow in her eyes, not bravery, acceptance. She steps into the circle. Her collar is released. She draws in a single breath. The throne reaches for her. She gasps, not in fear but in recognition, as if she has always known that this moment was waiting for her, as if she has lived her entire life beneath a shadow she could not name. Her memories unravel more quickly than the others before her. Not violently, not painfully, like silk unwinding, thread by thread, into nothing. She watches them as they leave her, a lullaby, a laugh, a pair of hands that once braided her hair. She watches them leave without fighting. Once the last memory fades, her eyes go empty. She kneels. She becomes part of the choir. The beam strengthens. The Astronomicon brightens. Somewhere across the void, a ship that would have been lost now finds its path. Millions will live, because 1,000 will die. The psychers stand in the chamber, or fall, or kneel, or dissolve from within, one by one. Some collapse in silence, their minds flickering out like candles in a storm. Others linger, half-conscious, their thoughts shredded but not yet gone. The choir master watches their progress. He gestures occasionally. Those who cannot hold the alignment are removed. Those who can are pushed further, deeper into the connection. The Emperor's light continues, and somewhere behind it, behind the vast burning presence, there is a sound, a whisper, not to the ears, to the soul. Help me. Or perhaps it is nothing more than the echo of their own dying thoughts, reflected back from the place where divinity touches agony. No one knows. No one can ask. The throne hungers, and the psychers are consumed. The ceremony continues without pause or acknowledgement. The Imperium endures. At the chamber's far edge, a door opens. More psychers are led in. The cycle begins again. Time inside the throne's chambers cannot be measured by clocks. There are no shifts, no days, no nights. Only the ongoing, unbroken consumption of thought and self. The psychers who remain conscious experience it not as minutes or hours, but as an unraveling. Their minds flicker between clarity and dissolution, like candles sputtering under a wind that cannot be stopped. Some cling to fragments, a song, a word, the idea of a name. These fragments will not last. The beam of psychic force continues to burn upward, a pillar of invisible fire that spans realities. The psychers feel themselves stretched along it, their essence thinned across impossible distances. They can sense starships moving in the warp, guided by their sacrifice. They feel the innumerable whispers of navigators. They feel the infinite hostility of the warp pressing against their minds. And through it all, at the center, the Emperor remains. They see him, not with the eyes, but with the remnants of thought that have not yet been taken. He is vast. A presence that once was human and now is something else entirely, something fractured and aflame, something held together not by flesh or bone, but by will. His suffering is not a cry. It is not even pain as mortals understand it. It is endurance, a constant, unbroken refusal to die. In that moment, brief, flickering, impossible, the psychers understand him, not his past, not his purpose, not his origin, but his burden. He is holding back the night, alone. The revelation destroys some. They collapse not from pain, but from the unbearable weight of empathy. Others survive it only because their minds are already dissolving. The truth cannot break what is no longer whole. The choir masters maintain the alignment with gestures that have become reflex. They adjust flows of psychic energy, redirect overloads, ease collapses where they can. Their faces remain expressionless, but their hands tremble. They are not immune to what they witness. They have simply learned to endure it longer. At the edge of the chamber, a custodian stands. He does not intervene, he does not move, but his head tilts ever so slightly, as though he has perceived something subtle shift in the psychic flow. His presence is a reminder that this ritual is sacred, but also that it is a weapon. If control is lost, if a breach occurs, if a demon slips through the cracks in the psychers' minds, he will act. And when he acts, he will be absolute. There is no failure here. Not because none occurs, but because failure is erased before it can be recorded. Another psycher reaches the brink, a man whose shoulders once carried pride. He tries to hold on to a single memory, someone's voice saying his name. He tries to speak it aloud, his lips move, no sound comes out. The throne pulls it from him, the memory dissolves. He sighs, not in grief, in release. He falls to his knees, eyes empty, and becomes part of the choir. The beam strengthens again. Miles above them and across the stars, navigators adjust their charts. Warp storms shift. A fleet avoids annihilation by mere degrees. An Imperial convoy reaches a world in time to stop a famine. An Astra Militarum regiment arrives on a battlefield 1 hour earlier than history would have otherwise allowed. Small victories, unseen victories, paid for here, paid in minds, paid in selves. The Emperor remains silent. The psychers fade. The attendants continue their work. The custodians watch. The beam burns, the warp trembles. The galaxy continues, because the throne hungers, and the Imperium feeds it. This is the truth that Terra will not speak aloud. This is the truth pilgrims are not told. This is the foundation upon which the glorious Imperium stands. The Astronomicon shines, the darkness recoils, but the light is not free. It costs everything, and the cost never ends. Chapter 3 closes here, at the core of the Imperium, where survival and sacrifice are the same words spoken in different tones of breath. The next chapter does not take us deeper, it pulls us back. It asks what kind of universe can be built upon a god who must consume his children to endure. Far above the hidden chambers where psychers dissolve into light and memory, Terra continues to breathe. The pilgrims walk. The incense burns. The statues watch. Life persists with the same unstoppable inertia as the palace machinery humming beneath stone and sanctified steel. The truth of the sacrifice does not reach the surface directly. It rises in distortions, in softened words, in half-understood rituals, like heat shimmering above a furnace. And humanity, by instinct or design, shapes these distortions into stories. Stories are gentler than truth. In the ecclesiarchy's grand basilicas, where gold leaf and stained glass catch the filtered sun in holy brilliance, priests speak of the emperor's unending vigilance. They describe him as a guardian seated upon the golden throne, exerting his divine will to guide billions of souls through the darkness of the galaxy. Their voices echo through chambers large enough to drown doubt. The air vibrates with hymns, organ thunder, and a faith so passionate it nearly becomes fever. To the priests, the psychers are not consumed, they are exalted. They are said to merge with the Emperor, to join him in the eternal defense of humanity, to become part of the light that keeps the warp's horrors at bay. And when the priests speak these words, they believe them. Truly, they weep as they recite their litanies. They press trembling hands to the altar. Some collapse mid-sermon, overcome by devotion so intense it leaves their faces streaked with tears and their voices hoarse. But even belief can be shaped. Even faith can be taught. And the ecclesiarchy is not the only voice. In the dim lecture halls of the Schola Progenium, where the orphans of imperial officers are raised to serve the state, the story shifts. The instructors speak not of ascension, but of necessity. They describe the warp as a sea of nightmares, ever hungry, ever reaching, ever waiting. They explain that psychers are dangerous because their minds are windows, and windows must be shuttered, reinforced, or closed. They speak of sacrifice as mathematics. One psycher keeps a ship from drifting into madness. 100 psychers guide a fleet. 1,000 psychers keep the Astronomicon burning, and billions are saved. A life, to them, is a resource spent to maintain the Imperium's continued existence. There is no cruelty in this logic. There is simply scale. The Imperium is too vast for kindness. And yet, even this is not the whole truth. Beyond sanctuaries and scholastic halls, beyond the curated devotion of the ecclesiarchy and the tactical necessities of the administratum, there are whispers, pockets of rumor, half-spoken fears exchanged behind closed doors where candles flicker low and the air grows still. These whispers never rise to sermons. They never appear in public record, but they move through the minds of humanity like a quiet current. Some say the Emperor is not ascendant. They say he is dying, that the throne keeps him, alive only by devouring souls, that the psychers are not joining him, they are fuel. Others say he is already dead, that the body persists, but the mind is ash, and the Astronomicon is nothing but a machine sustained by sacrifice, a ghost light, a hollow flame. Still others whisper something darker, not death, not decay, but transformation, that the Emperor is becoming something new, something that cannot awaken while tethered to flesh, that the psycher sacrifice is not merely sustenance, but chrysalis. These whispers are not spoken loudly. They are murmurs exchanged between scholars who read too deeply into restricted archives, between soldiers who saw something in the warp and refused to describe it, between clerics who woke from dreams they cannot name without trembling. No one knows the truth. No one can, because no one is allowed to. The custodians do not speak of his state. The Adeptus Mechanicus who maintain the throne do not speculate aloud. The High Lords avoid the subject as though their tongues might burn at the words. And the Emperor, If he still thinks, if he still feels, if he still is, remains silent. The silence, more than any decree, shapes the Imperium. People fill silence with meaning, with hope, or with fear. In the crowded dormitories of Terra's lower districts, a mother kneels with her child before a crude shrine of scrap metal shaped into the imperial aquila. She lights a wick of tallow and whispers, "He loves us. He watches us. He protects us." She believes it because she must, because the alternative would shatter something fragile and irreplaceable inside her. Above them, in the shining halls of the ecclesiarchy, priests chant, "The Emperor demands sacrifice, for he sacrifices himself unending." They, too, believe it, because belief is how they endure the knowledge that the galaxy would devour humanity whole if the throne ever faltered. And deep below, where psychers kneel in unending silence and the light of the Astronomicon pulses like a heartbeat carved from agony, the truth burns, unseen, unspoken, and unshared. If the Emperor is suffering, no one can help him. If the Emperor is dying, no one can save him. If the Emperor is changing, no one can stop it. Faith fills the silence, because silence cannot be born. In the high spires of Terra, where the palace walls fade into haze and the air thins to a cold whisper, there are academies for the powerful. Places where nobles, hierarchs, and the officers of the Imperium learn how to speak about the Emperor without ever speaking too closely. Here, debates are conducted in carefully measured phrases, wrapped in metaphor and caution. One does not speculate, one interprets, one does not question, one contemplates. The difference is survival. A lecturer in one of these vaulted chambers presses a hand to a data slate and recites, "The Emperor is eternal. His will shapes the galaxy. His sacrifice is voluntary and unending." The students nod. They record the words. They memorize the cadence. But every student in that hall has heard a different version somewhere, whispered over wine, muttered behind closed doors, or spoken in a tone of feigned academic curiosity. The Emperor does not act. The Emperor endures. And endurance is not the same as living. In another chamber, a seeker of knowledge, too curious, too unguarded, asks a quiet question. If he is eternal, why must he be fed? The room falls silent. No one answers. The questioner's name will be removed from the registry by morning. Knowledge in the Imperium is not power. Knowledge is danger. People survive by believing what keeps them upright, and belief is shaped by need. On shrine worlds, where statues of the Emperor rise higher than fortress walls and flowers are still grown in gardens of white ash, the story is different again. The Emperor is not suffering, he is watching. He hears every prayer, he sees every act of loyalty. Children there are taught that every psyker chosen for the Golden Throne smiles as they are guided to eternity. They join their father, they become stars. Some of these children grow up and are taken themselves. Their smiles do not last, yet the story remains, because stories are armor. Further out beyond Terra, in the dark metal corridors of void ships and the frozen trenches of war fronts, the story shifts yet again. Soldiers do not have the luxury of myth. Their prayers are quick, utilitarian. They ask the Emperor for aim, for strength, for survival through one more hour. They whisper, "Let him burn for us as we bleed for him." There is honesty in that, harsh, stripped, unornamented. Among the Astra Militarum, the Emperor is not a god of warmth or comfort. He is the one who stands when all others fall, and so must they. But even among soldiers there are stories that travel like smoke. Stories carried by astropaths whose eyes have gone white. By navigators who speak only in metaphor. By psychers who survived their training and emerged sanctioned, broken but breathing. They speak of the throne not as a beacon, but as a furnace. They describe the emperor as a sun that cannot cool. They say the sacrifice is not holy, it is necessary. Necessity is colder than faith. It has no hymn, no banner, no mercy. Yet there are other stories, softer, quieter, carved from hope rather than fear. These come from those who believe the emperor is not fading but waiting, that he is on the verge of awakening, of returning, of speaking again. They call it the divine resurrection. They whisper of visions in which he rises from the throne in radiant fire, his body restored, his will absolute, his voice shaking the stars themselves. Some custodians have heard these tales. They do not smile, they do not correct them, they simply say nothing. And silence is the most terrifying answer of all, for silence can mean it is true, or it is impossible, or it must not be spoken. Rumor becomes scripture. Scripture becomes doctrine. Doctrine becomes law, and beneath it all lies a truth no one will touch. No one knows what the emperor thinks. No one knows if he feels. No one knows if he dreams. Even those who stand beside the throne, those few, those luminous, those golden, do not claim to know his mind. They speak only of duty, not faith, not belief. Duty. The Imperium does not rest on understanding, it rests on momentum. Because if humanity stops to ask whether the Emperor lives or suffers or even remains himself, the entire edifice of civilization would fracture under the weight of the question. So the stories continue, and the stories are beautiful. And the stories are terrible. And the stories keep the galaxy moving. For to know the truth would be unbearable. To know the truth would be to look directly into the light of the Astronomicon and feel the scream inside it. And no human mind is meant to endure that. Faith is not born of certainty, it is born of silence. There are places in the Imperium where truth is spoken more plainly, but never aloud and never without consequence. These places exist at the edges of light, the archives where pages crumble under the weight of years, the sealed vaults of the administratum where records are stored in rooms the size of cathedrals, the meditation chambers of astropaths who have seen too much. Here, truth survives like embers buried beneath ash. A scholar in a dust-choked archive traces her fingers along the faded ink of a pre-heresy manuscript. The text speaks of the emperor not as a god, but as a man of colossal will, a leader, a conqueror, a father in the most terrible and literal sense. The scholar closes the book immediately. Her hands shake. She will not speak of it, not to her colleagues, not to her reflection in the mirror, not even to her God. The walls listen, hear, and Terra remembers. In another place, a sanctioned psyker sits alone in a quiet cell in the upper cloisters of a telepathica enclave. His eyes are white. His voice is thin. He murmurs ceaseless fragments of messages received through the Astronomicon. Ships, distances, trajectories. But sometimes when the room is empty and the lights dim, he whispers something else, something not meant to be heard. He is calling to someone, he is waiting, he is alone. No one asks who he is, no one asks who he waits for. They do not want to know the answer. The psyker whispers these words not as prophecy, but as memory, something he felt in the beam, something he cannot forget, something that was not meant for him. Across the Imperium, the stories differ, but the need beneath them is always the same. Humanity cannot survive without the Astronomicon. The Astronomicon cannot survive without the throne. The throne cannot endure without sacrifice. Therefore, the sacrifice must be holy, or the sacrifice must be necessary, or the sacrifice must be inevitable, because if it is none of these things, then it is monstrous. No one can face that. Not the priests singing hymns in marble cathedrals, not the guardsmen dying in a trench on a nameless moon, not the mother kneeling before a scrap metal altar, not the child whose dreams have begun to whisper in unfamiliar voices, not the psyker standing in line beneath the palace. The Imperium is built upon a truth too vast to hold in a single human mind. So humanity breaks it into smaller truths. The Emperor loves you. The Emperor protects you. The Emperor demands of you because he gives of himself. The Emperor sees every sacrifice. The Emperor is with you. These are not lies, they are prayers, and prayers are how the human soul survives. Yet, beneath the prayers, beneath the hymns, beneath the official histories and the whispered doubts, there is something else still. Not a doctrine, not a belief, a feeling, a dim, persistent, impossible feeling shared by billions who have never met, who will never speak, who have never heard one another's voices. They feel it when they kneel. They feel it when they look toward the palace. They feel it in the pulse of the Astronomicon humming through space. A longing, not to know the Emperor, but to be known by him, to be seen, to be remembered, to matter, even if only for a moment, even if only as a single step in an endless procession of souls, even if only as a flame that flickers once, then is gone. The Imperium tells them this is possible, because the alternative is despair, and despair is the one heresy Terra cannot allow. The stories protect humanity. The stories protect the Emperor. The stories protect the throne. But the silence protects the truth. There are those who have stood closer to the throne than any pilgrim, any priest, any general. Those who walk the inner corridors in silence, clad in auric armor that reflects no doubt. The Adeptus custodes do not debate. They do not theologize. They do not entertain philosophies of the Emperor's state or fate. Their understanding is earned through proximity, carved into them across millennia of unwavering watchfulness. And not one of them speaks of what they have seen. To the Imperium, this silence is confirmation of holiness. To the custodes, it is necessity, because whatever sits upon the golden throne, whatever remains of the Emperor, cannot be explained in words that humans could survive hearing. So they say nothing. They simply continue their eternal vigil. Beyond the custodians, deeper still, are the tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus assigned to the golden throne. They do not think in terms of gods or myths. They think in circuits, conduits, energy transfer, and the ever-worsening strain of a machine that was never meant to be a machine. Their prayers are code. Their hymns are diagnostic sequences. Their devotion is repair. They speak of the throne as an engine of impossible scale and purpose, one that is deteriorating, one that cannot be rebuilt, one that no living genius fully comprehends. They know the sacrifice is not symbolic. They know it is required. They know that without it, the Astronomicon would gutter and collapse in days. But even they do not claim to understand him. The Mechanicus believes the Emperor is not dying, because the concept of dying is insufficient. They believe the Emperor is transitioning into a form beyond biology, beyond matter, beyond the conceptual boundaries human minds can bear. Not ascension, not decay. A transformation that cannot yet resolve. Their confidence is not comforting. It feels like standing on a crumbling bridge and being told to keep walking because the other side must exist. Between these extremes of certainty, priests with their hymns, soldiers with their obedience, scholars with their quiet terror, lies the common soul of humanity. The billions who will never see Terra, who will never know the rituals performed beneath its surface, who may live and die believing the Emperor watches them personally from a throne of shining gold. They do not know the truth. They do not need to. What they need is hope. Hope that their suffering has meaning. Hope that the Emperor hears even their smallest prayer. Hope that the sacrifice, their sacrifice if it comes, matters. For without that hope, the Imperium would collapse faster than any invading fleet could dream of accomplishing. This is why the truth is not spoken, not because it is forbidden, but because it is unbearable. The Emperor endures an agony held between death and apotheosis. The Astronomicon burns because psychers are fed to it without pause. The Imperium survives only because sacrifice never ends. To speak this truth aloud would break the galaxy. So the galaxy lives by stories, the priest's rapture, the general's certainty, the mother's whispered bedtime prayer, the psycher's last trembling acceptance. And in the silence beneath it all, the truth waits, unchanging, undeniable, unspoken. Chapter 4 ends here, where humanity clings to meaning in the face of a God who does not answer. The last chapter will pull back the veil completely, not to reveal salvation, not to reveal doom, but to confront the grim fact. If the sacrifice ever stops, the Imperium dies. The galaxy beyond Terra is vast. It stretches in every direction as an endless ocean of void and flame, of dying stars and newborn nebulae, of worlds thriving under pale suns and worlds long frozen beneath the husks of forgotten wars. Across these distances, humanity clings to existence not by strength, not by unity, but by direction. The Astronomicon shines across the warp like a signal through storm-black seas, a burning thread that binds every distant world to the same center, the same hope, the same God. If the throne ever falters, that thread breaks, and humanity becomes adrift. On a distant void ship, its hull streaked with the scars of warp travel and its crew's faces etched with sleepless vigilance, a navigator stands at the prow of a towering bridge. Her third eye remains closed, hidden beneath a silver blindfold stitched with sigils that glow faintly in the dark. Her breath is steady, though every inhalation carries the weight of lives depending upon her. She feels the Astronomicon like a pulsing star behind the fabric of reality. It is not a light she sees, it is a song, a pressure, a direction. And tonight, for a fleeting moment, it flickers. The navigator's hand trembles, not in terror, in recognition. She has known this flicker before. The bridge crew does not notice. They continue their work, unaware that existence just wavered at the edge of perception. But the navigator feels the strain, not of her own mind, but of something unimaginably distant, something vast and weary, something held together by the sacrifice of those who do not return from Terra. She whispers, voice barely audible, "Another one is gone, then." Not sorrow, not relief, acceptance. Across 1,000 worlds, the same flicker is felt by those attuned to it. Astropaths pause mid-chant. Choirs falter by the smallest note. The warp shivers, like an animal disturbed in its lair. And then the Astronomicon brightens again, as fresh psychers join the choir and the throne consumes what it must to continue. The galaxy does not change, but something in the galaxy remembers. On agri-worlds where fields roll beneath sun-warmed skies, farmers pause with their hands in the soil. They cannot say why, but they bow their heads. On forge worlds where industry bellows in iron heat, tech priests halt a prayer cycle mid-chant and adjust their rhythms to match a pulse they feel but cannot name. On hive worlds where the air hangs thick with promethium fumes and human voices echo like distant mechanical chimes, workers look briefly toward the sky, wondering if they heard something. A heartbeat, not theirs. The Imperium runs through these shared pulses, unseen, unspoken, but felt. But on some worlds there is no pause. On some worlds, war never stops long enough to feel anything at all. On a blasted wasteland of ash and cratered stone, guardsmen crouch behind shattered barricades as artillery screams overhead. The sky burns with tracer fire. The ground smells of cordite and blood. A sergeant grips his lace gun with hands blackened by dirt and exhaustion. He does not look toward the stars. He does not pray. He simply breathes because breathing is all that remains to him. Yet, somewhere in the back of his mind, a thought arrives. Wordless, formless, undeniable. Not yet. Hold, hold. He does not know where the thought comes from. He does not ask. He moves. His unit follows. They survive, barely. The Astronomicon does not guide only ships. It guides humanity. It holds them together through fear, obedience, awe, and something else. Something more fragile, more precious than any fortress wall, continuity, not hope. Hope can be lost. Continuity. The knowledge that the next breath follows the last, that the next day follows this one, that there is a future even if it is shaped in fire. In the deepest vaults beneath the palace, where the Psykers kneel in silent rows and the throne devours thought to keep the stars aligned, continuity is paid for one soul at a time. And while the Imperium believes that each sacrifice strengthens the Emperor himself remains still. Silent, burning, enduring. The Psykers' minds flicker out like embers. The throne hungers. Across the stars, humanity feels a pulse of guidance, faint but constant, like the echo of footsteps leading them forward through darkness. Yet something else moves beneath it. Something slow, something patient, something that has been growing for 10,000 years. The throne does not simply take. It changes what remains. The choir does not simply die. They become part of something unseen. And far, far away, in the heart of that golden machinery, something stirs. Not awakening, not yet, but turning. As if a thought long dormant has begun, slowly, painfully to remember itself. The galaxy does not notice, not yet, because the cost continues, and the Imperium endures. There are no ceremonies for the Psykers who vanish into the throne. Their names are not recorded in any ledger beyond the initial transport manifest. Their families, if they had families, receive no notification. There is no urn, no memorial, no cenotaph. Nothing of them returns. Their absence becomes only the faintest of adjustments in the Astronomicon's steady pulse, a small correction in the Imperium's constant struggle against oblivion. And yet the galaxy feels them. Not because they are remembered, but because their loss allows everything else to continue. On a world half-shrouded in volcanic ash, a regiment of the Astra Militarum digs trenches against an orc incursion that has lasted 3 months longer than any tactician projected. The air is thick with burnt ozone and the metallic tang of blood. The soldiers' faces are gaunt, their armor dented and soot-stained. They have been awake far too long. Their commander stands among them, her voice steady even as her hands shake. She does not speak of the Emperor's love. She does not speak of glory. She speaks only of the line that must not break. And somewhere, beneath her breath, unheard by her troops, she whispers, "Do not let the light fail now." She has seen void ships fall from the warp. She remembers what it looks like when the Astronomicon falters. It is not dramatic. There is no explosion, no storm, no scream. There is only silence. A ship arrives with empty corridors, with doors hanging open, with meals half-eaten, with data slates still glowing on tables. Every living soul aboard simply gone, consumed, devoured, erased by the warp the moment their path was lost. No remains, no bodies, no proof, just absence. The commander has seen this. She does not need sermons. She knows why the Psykers must die. She does not resent it. She does not question it. She fears the alternative. Somewhere, far from this war front, in the glittering spires of a hive city where nobles dine under chandeliers of crystal and servo lights, laughter echoes through banquet halls as though war and hunger were myths. Servitors carry trays of preserved fruits and delicacies harvested from worlds that will never know the luxury of tasting them. A governor, adorned in robes of iridescent silk, raises a goblet and declares, "The Emperor protects." His guests echo the words automatically, but none of them have seen the black ships. None of them have seen psychers led in chains. None of them have felt the cold of the throne's chambers. Their faith is comfortable, painless. And yet, even here something still reaches them. In the quiet of their sleep, dreams whisper, a distant light, a distant hunger, a distant, ceaseless endurance. They do not understand it, they never will, but they feel it. Every human does. For the Astronomicon is not simply a beacon, it is a tether to the Emperor's will, a tether to the Imperium as an idea, not just a nation, a tether to a collective unconscious certainty. Humanity must go on, even if it costs everything, even if the cost is unending. And on Terra, in the depths where stone becomes ancient machinery and the air becomes electric with psychic pressure, a single psyker remains conscious longer than expected. A man, middle-aged, weathered, a former schoolteacher from a quiet world where rain fell on rooftops and life was slow and mundane. He sees his memories unraveling. He feels them leaving him. But unlike the others, he does not surrender to panic. He tries to watch. He tries to understand. The moment before the last of his identity dissolves, he glimpses something behind the Emperor's presence. Not a voice, not a thought, but a shape of intention. Not hunger, not despair, not cruelty, purpose, not the kind written in scripture, not the kind recited in basilicas, not the kind painted on murals. A different purpose. A purpose that costs everything, including him. Something the Emperor has not shared, something he cannot share. Something larger than salvation and far more terrible. The man does not have time to understand it. His memory breaks. His name dissolves. He joins the choir. The beam strengthens. The galaxy holds. And far across the void, a single navigator feels the Astronomicon pulse with new clarity and breathes out in relief. Humanity continues. Not through grace, not through mercy, through sacrifice, through cost, through the unending price of a god who cannot die and a species that cannot afford to let him. There is no ending to this cycle. There is no point at which the debt is paid. There is only continuation, forever. It is easy, from a great distance, to imagine that the sacrifice is clean, that it happens elsewhere, to someone else, at some other time, that the psychers who vanish into the throne are abstractions, necessary, yes, unfortunate, yes, but distant. The galaxy relies on distance. Distance keeps grief from becoming rebellion. Distance keeps empathy from becoming collapse. But there are worlds where the black ships return. Their arrival is never announced. There is no warning, no procession, no ceremonial welcome. They appear in orbit like an eclipse, vast and silent, their hulls darkened by the residue of the warp. They do not broadcast, they do not signal, they simply wait. On such a world, under a sky the color of slate, a mother wakes to the sound of a knock at her door. Her child, small, pale, born with eyes too old for their age, has always spoken of voices in the wind. The child never understood fear. They simply asked questions no one could answer. Now the wardens stand at the door. They do not raise their weapons, they do not shout. They speak without inflection. Your child has been chosen. The mother does not argue, she does not beg, not because she accepts the duty, but because she knows there is no world in which refusal changes anything. Her hands tremble as she prepares her child's coat. She straightens their hair. She tries to memorize the shape of their face. She tells herself this is an honor. She tells herself this is a gift. She tells herself this is necessary, but the truth is a wound. She will never see them again. The child does not cry. The child does not cling. The child only asks quietly, "Will he speak to me?" No one answers. The question is too gentle, too human, too unbearably sincere. The mother's breath catches in her throat. She opens her mouth. She wants to say yes. She wants to say he will welcome you with warmth, with love, with recognition. She wants to give her child a comfort to carry into the dark. But she cannot, because even lies feel too fragile to offer now. Instead, she kneels. She presses her forehead to her child's. She whispers, "Remember that I love you." The child nods. And that is enough. The wardens take them. The mother closes the door. She does not scream. She does not collapse. She stands absolutely still. Because if she falls now, she will never rise again. On the black ship, the child will sit among hundreds. They will see fear. They will feel confusion. They will hear the warp whisper. But they will also remember warmth. They will remember hands on their shoulders. They will remember being loved. That memory will be the last to fade. And when it goes, it will not vanish violently. It will drift away like a candle flickering out in the wind. The Astronomicon will pulse. A ship will find its course. A world will be saved. And no record will ever bear the child's name. The Imperium continues. Not because it is righteous, not because it is just, but because humanity refuses to die, and the Emperor refuses to let it, even if the cost is everything he once was. Even if the cost is everything humanity could be. Even if the cost never ends. The mother will one day die, the trenches will one day fill, the navigator will one day close her third eye, the sergeant will one day fall in the ash of some nameless moon, but the throne will remain. The beam will burn, the choir will kneel, and the galaxy will move forward one breath at a time. Because to stop is unthinkable. To stop is to fall. To stop is to let the darkness win. There is no hope in this. There is no despair. There is only endurance. There are moments when the Imperium pauses. Not in peace, there is no peace, but in stillness. A fleet traveling through the warp glides in relative calm, its Geller fields flickering like faint halos of reality. A Hive city, for a single night, falls quiet between shifts as the manufactorums slow their endless output. A shrine world's bells toll at dusk, their echoes rolling across white stone courtyards like a memory of something gentle. In these moments, rare, fragile, almost accidental, humanity breathes. And it is in these breaths that the truth of the sacrifice becomes clear. Not in the agony of the psychers, not in the chant of the choir, not in the silent presence of the custodians, not even in the Emperor's unending endurance, but in the people who will never know any of it. The lovers who share warmth in a tiny room above a crowded street. The students who read by candlelight, dreaming of posts in the administratum. The merchants who argue over grain prices in dusty open-air markets. The soldiers who laugh, tired and hoarse, around a fire that smells of smoke and cheap recaf. The children who chase each other down alleys, their joy small and bright. They do not think of the Golden Throne. They do not know the rituals of the Telepathica. They do not feel the weight of a collapsing god. They live. And that is the purpose, not glory, not empire, not dominion, continuation. Humanity persists through monotony, through sorrow, through small comforts, through small hopes that flicker faintly in the dark. Not magnificent, not grand, but stubborn, enduring, unkillable. The Imperium, for all its cruelty, for all its unthinkable cost, is built to preserve these moments, however imperfectly, however brutally, however coldly. It is not kindness, it is refusal. the refusal to let the galaxy erase mankind. High above Terra, in orbit streaked with the contrails of endless ships, a small transport vessel begins its descent. On board are pilgrims, ordinary men and women who have spent their lives saving for a chance to stand upon the world where the Emperor lies. They imagine glory, splendor, radiant gold. What they will find is stone. Ritual, silence. They will not see the throne. They will not be told of the cost. But they will kneel in a plaza filled with incense smoke so thick it blurs the sun. They will whisper prayers that have been spoken 1 trillion times by tongues now turned to dust. They will feel something stir inside them, something quiet, something solemn, something like grief that is not sorrow. They will not have words for it, but they will understand not the truth, but the weight the Emperor endures, and so must they. Deep beneath them, another psyker takes his final breath as himself. His memories fade, his mind dissolves. He becomes one more thread in the beam that holds back the dark. The Astronomicon brightens. A ship finds its path. A soldier lives one more day. A mother wakes and holds her child close, without knowing she has been spared from grief she could not bear. The galaxy does not thank the psykers. The galaxy does not remember them. But the light continues. And in that light, humanity survives. Not because it is destined, not because it is chosen, not because it is righteous, but because it refuses to stop. Because it endures, because it must. The Golden Throne burns, the Emperor remains, the Imperium continues, and the price is forever. End.